Bartenders of Reddit, what is the craziest story you have from behind the mahogany? I will start. I tend bar at an Irish bar in MN. I like to work weeknights because they aren't as busy as weekends, but I still make plenty of dough. Anyway, this was a Monday night. It was late in the evening, so I was the only employee left working. The manager and other servers had gone home, and I was left alone with 8 to 10 of my regulars. In walked a young man who had clearly been overserved somewhere else. He sat down and tried to order a drink, but couldn't articulate what he wanted. I told him that all I was giving him tonight was water. He was actually really cool about this and drank a few glasses while he sat at the bar. After a while he asked if he could have a drink now. Kinda reminded me of a young child asking for a treat. I told him no, and he said that's cool, I'm just gonna go home. I asked if he was driving, and he said yep. I told him I couldn't let him drive and that I would call him a cab. He said that was stupid and he could drive home fine. I told him that if he got in the car I was obligated to call the police. He snapped. He said, you want to call the cops? Shh, I'll call the cops myself. He proceeded to dial 911 and hand me his cell phone. I spoke with the dispatch and explained what was going on. She actually laughed. While I was talking to the 911 dispatcher, the young man realized what was going on and started asking for his phone back. I hung up with the dispatch and tried to keep the young man in the bar till the police arrived. He was getting very angry, and so I finally gave him his phone back, and he ran out of the bar and climbed into his car, peeling out of the parking lot and through to red lights. 2 seconds later 4 squad cars came flying down the street and proceeded to pull him over. Kid calls cops on himself, gets DUI. Had a mines from an Irish pub too, in CA. I worked for these two brothers who owned the place. They're from Ireland. Anyway, the cops in this town are extremely power crazy from lack of anything better to do in an affluent area. Anyway, this guy is at the bar getting shoused. He's nice though. He walks outside for a cig, stumbles a little bit, leans against a tree, finishes up and comes back in. A couple cops follow him into the bar and come up behind him. They accost him, not sure for what reason. He was quiet outside and I watched him the whole time and he didn't do anything out of the ordinary. Anyway, they grab him and say, you're drunk. You're under arrest for public intoxication. Now, yeah, the dude is drunk, but he's been in before and he always cabs home or something. I say, hey, he is not drunk in public. He's in a private establishment and leave him alone. He's not harming anyone. I admit, I'm no lawyer, so I'm not sure of the technicalities behind him being in public or not, but it was still effed up. The cops tell me to shut the F up, which I don't, so they then say okay fine, now he'll be drunk in public, and drag this guy out of the bar into the street. I'm flipping out, but what could I do? One of my bosses was in back, and here's what's going on. Only a few seconds had passed. Now I had worked with the other brother before, and this was my first time working with / meeting this particular brother. Being the scrappy little Irishman that he is, he comes out and screams, what the is this? And hops over the bar, runs out the front, and tackles one of the officers to defend his patron. Other cop lets go of their original target and whips out his nightstick and starts taxing my boss while he wails on the other cop. He gets beaten pretty badly, and there's a lot of folks watching by this point, and the cops look around and simply leave. A couple employees bring my boss back in, and he's got blood all over his face. He looks at me and says, hey there, what's your name, lad? Don't believe we've met yet. This all went down so quickly that I just stood there poker-faced until that moment. Then we all had a laugh and got drunk. There were no legal repercussions on any party involved in this event. I was bartending at this German sports bar in the late afternoon / early evening when 2 of my regulars came in. After a few rounds, one of the men says he's going to take a smoke and for his friend to watch his things. The guy gets up from his chair, takes a few steps patting down his pockets, and realizes he forgot his smokes. While still walking toward the door, he says, hey Cletus, throw me a cig. His friend opens his pack and without looking, chucks it in the direction of his friend walking toward the door. At that exact moment, he spun around and the cigarette landed straight in his mouth, in smoking position. He continued to turn back to face the door, then stopped dead in his tracks, realizing what had just happened. We all then continued to freak out and realized that will never happen again in a million years. Mine aren't so crazy as they are sad, since I used to work in a sports club with many poker machines. I did bar service and payouts, giving people poker machine credit slips, so you saw a lot of people down on their luck, others who were clearly addicted. SOP was to report the people to supervisors and duty of care and all that. We were supposed to provide them with gambling helpline materials. Never once saw it happen. There were some awesome pokey players too, though. Biggest tip I ever got was $175 odd, and people don't normally tip in Ors. After one of our regulars who like me won several thousand. This guy owned a bunch of businesses and drove either a gorgeous Harley or gorgeous Mercedes. He went through thousands like it was pocket change, probably was for him. One amusing thing was when a new guy came in to try his luck. I think he was there to have dinner with the family or something. Anyway, his first time ever playing a poker machine. He's playing 1-cent machines, typically lowest risk, lowest reward, and he bets 25 cents. Second spin, he gets a jackpot, not an unheard of occurrence with how jackpots work. It was a slow night, and I was watching from behind the bar thinking he'd probably just gotten jackpot 4, which capped out at around $25. Yeah, no. Guy spent 50 cents and got jackpot 1. Which was worth $23,000 at the time. Never saw him again. My uncle, Irish, runs an Irish bar in New York. He was in the back one night doing paperwork after hours when he heard glass clinking in the alley behind. Someone was stealing his bottles or something. He reaches above the bar and grabs a hell sign by the Galway All-Ireland winners from 1988 that was hanging on the wall. He runs out the back and sees a 7-foot-tall black guy who weighs more than 2 fat people put together. He bangs the hurl against the wall and starts running at him with it. The guy starts screaming and runs off, dropping whatever barrels, glass he was robbing. My uncle goes back to the paperwork, and an hour later, there's a knock at the front door. It's the black guy with 2 NYPD. The guy shouts, "That's the guy. That's the mother F who came at me with the giant wooden spoon." I used to bartend for an upscale catering company, weddings, corporate events, etc. Worst story ever was a white trashy re-wedding. They only contracted our company for the bar, and it was a cheaper place doing the food. Worst night of tips I had at that job, by a large statistical margin. But that wasn't the worst part. Both bride and groom had children from a previous marriage. The groom's son, in particular, was quite endearing to me. He was middle school age and smart as all hell, the rare small child who can hold a semi-adult conversation and hold his own. I kept him stocked with Shirley Temples all night, and we talked a fair amount of baseball. So the wedding party decided to commemorate the occasion with shot glasses for the wedding party. Said shot glasses were put to use aggressively throughout the night. At the end, as we are packing everything up, one of the shot glasses is left on the counter. Most of the guests have gone by this point. Both bride and groom are well into their 40s, so by 10:30, even, the place was fairly empty. I ask around about the shot glass and find out that it belongs to the groom. He is seated with his son and the bride's daughter at a table by the dance floor. I walk over. The groom is barely coherent, passing out in the chair. The children are trying in vain to keep him awake. At the same time as me, a few other people notice this situation and begin assisting with him. With the situation under control, I want as little to do with this sordid reminder of the broken home I come from. I set the shot glass on the table and go to leave. But as I take a step away, the little girl tells me, "Please, don't give it back to him. He'll drink more then." I stop, and the son grabs the shot glass and pockets it. He reassures me that he'll keep it from his dad for the rest of the night. The look in his eyes tells me that he means it. It's a look I know all too well. I've never wanted to quit a job more in my life than that drive home. I was a bartender for 10 years in New York City and saw tons of crazy and messed up things that I don't want to repeat. Here's a good one. I worked a neighborhood bar and had tons of regulars from all walks of life. Every bartender has a gift, and mine is remembering people's drinks and the specific way it's made. If you're picky about your martini, you want me to be your bartender. Anyway, a rabbi in his late 60s would come in every Monday at 6:30 p.m. Not in a rush yet. 8 p.m. in New York City, but people are starting to trickle in. I never knew his name and just always called him Rabbi. Rabbi's drink was a Rob Roy, straight up with red label scotch and barely a splash of sweet vermouth shaken, in plain ice then drained. Then I added the booze and swiftly stirred in order to cool the drink without watering it down. Finished it off with a lemon twist wipe on the rim of a chilled glass. Rabbi had been a regular for 4 years when one day I saw him walking in, so I began making his drink. The bar was unusually busy and all 6 tables and all bar stools were filled. I poured Rabbi's drink and then went to take care of tables. I was slammed. Was making a drink order when I noticed Rabbi not drinking, but instead stiffening up for a moment before he fell backwards and completely hit the ground hard. I jumped over the bar and saw that he was holding his arm. I thought it was a heart attack but not sure. He asked me to call a special ambulance service. Can't remember the name, but it was acidic. I ran across the street to a bodega and hurriedly asked for aspirin. Didn't have time to pay, just ran back to the bar and shoved it in Rabbi's mouth and made him swallow it with water. I was shocked when dinner customers were complaining about not having ketchup and yelled at the entire bar, "Can't you see we have a man who may be having a heart attack? F your ketchup." The ambulance showed up and unfortunately dropped him twice. I got fed up with them and called 911. The fire department was there first and took care of the entire situation. I thought that Rabbi had died because I hadn't seen him in several weeks. One day, I was pleasantly surprised when I saw Rabbi limping into the bar with the assistance of a younger man who turned out to be his son. His son told me that his dad had insisted on visiting me to thank me for saving his life. It turned out that 3 of his arteries were almost fully closed, and if he hadn't had the aspirin, he would have died. So, a rabbi walks into a bar, and I may have saved his life.